William Boyd is a literary novelist whose works please critics and win awards, while also appearing regularly in the bestseller lists. Why? Well, because he's also a great storyteller. He proved that with his earliest books like A Good Man in Africa and An Ice Cream War. It was confirmed in novels like Ordinary Thunderstorms, a thriller about a man who's forced to shed his entire identity, and Restless, a World War II spy story, which later became a TV film starring Charlotte Rampling. Sweet Caress is his 14th novel, the story of a female photographer whose life spans much of the 20th century. The twist, though Amory Clay is fictional, the book's illustrated with dozens of photographs by her and of her. William Boyd, your central character, she's called Amory Clay. She's born in 1908. She becomes a professional photographer. She goes to Berlin in the 30s. She photographs World War II in France and Germany. She goes to Vietnam, photographs the war there. Why a photographer?
Well, I'm very interested in photography. I've written a lot about it. I've been photographed a lot by some very famous photographers. But the interesting thing is that for the profession of photography, there was no glass ceiling. And even before World War I, women professional photographers were working with their own studios alongside their male counterparts. And it's a strange profession that has been very egalitarian. And so I wanted my character Amory to have a rackety old life and full of adventure. So choosing that profession meant I could send her anywhere. There was no social or cultural inhibition to her work as a woman. And so it was an ideal way of moving her around.
You say it's a sort of no glass ceiling in this profession, and in the acknowledgements you mentioned some of the photographers, people like Lee Miller, Diane Arbus, who one's heard of, who were obviously partial models for Amory, but one's heard of them partly, surely, because they were exceptional. Male war photographers are to a penny. The fact remains that female war photographers, for instance, are still pretty rare.
They're quite rare, but there's certainly a huge, as I call it, sorority of women photographers who were very successful, and if you're a cultural historian, you might have heard of them. I hadn't heard of a lot of them, and a lot of them, I sort of cherry-picked their lives for Amory's life. They seem to live long and adventurous lives, these women photographers. And so I thought at the end of the book I would just list their names.
Yes, you play a little trick on us though, because some of the acknowledgements are to women who appear in the book, and one assumes are real life figures. There's a photographer called Hannah Laura Hahn, and I saw her in the acknowledgements and Googled her, and there was no photographer in 1930s Berlin.
I always like to play these tricks of, you know, is it real or did I make it up? And in a way, a lot of my fiction plays with that boundary, you know, and tries to blur it so that you know you're reading a novel, but actually in a funny sort of way in your head it seems real.
Now you blur it even further in this book by lacing it with a whole series of photographs, some of which are supposedly of Amory, others of which were taken by Amory or indeed by other people. These are found photographs, things that you stumbled across.
It was a way of doing what I now realize I've been doing for a long time, of making that suspension of disbelief that you have when you're a reader of fiction. You believe in the world of the novel, but making it even more intense. And as soon as I put the photographs in the text, which I did right at the end when I'd finished the novel, I wasn't sure if it would work, but it seemed to me to give an incredible enhancement to the fiction.
Let's talk about some of those photographs. There's one at the preface, which is a photograph supposedly taken of Amory cavorting in a pond somewhere in the 1920s as a young woman. And there's been a bit of a brouhaha in the papers recently because someone has suggested that that photograph, which was picked up apparently by an acquaintance of yours in a gutter, in a bus stop in Dulwich, is a woman called Martha Fiennes, who's a film director and sister of the actor Ralph Fiennes.
I've met Martha Fiennes a few times. I can categorically say it isn't her.
It looks nothing like her.
No, and also the actual photograph is a period photograph. You know, they were tiny. They were 2 inches by 1 inch. So, you know, Martha is not over 100 years old. So there's nobody takes photographs like that anymore. But anyway, you know, hey, it was a fun bit of news.
Some of the other photographs are quite fun. There's a wonderful one of a horsey girl holding a tennis racket in the 1930s, which you suggest is the photograph that got Amory fired as a society photographer, destroyed her
she's
career.
actually holding two tennis rackets, so she looks like she's got wheels. No, it's part of Amory is a spirited young woman, and she's always trying to push the boundaries of this profession that she finds herself in. And initially she starts out as a society photographer. She's sent to hunt balls and 21st birthday parties and engagement parties, all very boring. And so she decides to try and take something natural, and take a snapshot. But of course it's her undoing. And in a way her early photographic career is a series of disasters. She's a willful, adventurous young woman, and that leads her eventually to becoming a war photographer.
Amory photographs war. Her father is very badly damaged mentally by his experiences in the First World War. Her husband, likewise, in the Second World War. And what you've done is you've spread her life story over the 20th century in a way that you've done before in other novels, particularly Any Human Heart, in which you invented a character called Logan Mann-Stewart. The challenge here, presumably, is to find ways to shoehorn your fictional characters into the real events without distorting and without raising the reader's sort of suspicions.
Yes, I mean, I'm a realistic novelist anyway, so in writing a novel, I want the world I create and the characters who populate it to seem real people. There's no kind of meta-fictional game going on. But what I've been doing in these long novels, which are kind of whole life novels from cradle to grave, is making a whole life seem real, which is quite a challenge. And there are various structural and technical things you can do to make your job easier. But basically, I weave this character, Amory, through a long and complicated life with ups and downs, and I steer her to areas of history and areas of geography that I'm intrigued by. And so it follows the kind of random pattern of any life. I mean, the challenge is to try and get 70 years into 400 pages, and that, again, requires some sort of structural know-how.
And another thing that this book tackles, which again is a frequent theme in your books, is the notion of identity and what makes a self.
If you're in the public eye in any way and you read a profile of yourself, you often come away from it thinking, am I? Do I seem like that? Because your sense of personal identity, which I think also is constantly changing, particularly as you age and as your experiences multiply, is evolving all the time as well. But you really have no idea how you are seen by others. You think you're presenting a self to the world, but very often it's misinterpreted.
William Boyd, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.